Yeah, and I want to give y'all a big thank you for coming out today, and a huge thank you to White River for hosting us this afternoon. We do not have space for a talk like this at the shop, so I'm super duper thankful that White River was able to extend this space for this beautiful afternoon. Like, this is one of the best afternoons I think we've seen in a really long time. So I'm very, very excited to be here. A little bit about Wild Birds Unlimited. Our mission is to connect people with nature and do it with excellence. So while, you know, our main front is a nature shop, we also do a lot of other programming just like this today. We lead bird walks, and we're totally happy to partner with any other organizations or communities, scout troops, church groups, you name it. If you want to get people that you care about out and involved in nature, reach out to us and we'll set something up for you. Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, we helped get the botanical garden set up with their new bird feeding station. So the next time y'all are at the BGO, check it out. Maybe you'll see a really cute little bird there having a snack. So yeah, it's been really great to get involved with that as well.
We have a bird nest box here from Wild Birds Unlimited. We just installed it. So far nobody has taken up residence. We're still watching.
And hey, the birds are just getting started with their second round, so who knows? You might have somebody move in today and we're not even knowing it yet. Wow, a third round already even. So yeah, it's nesting season is definitely in full swing. And without any further ado, we're going to get started. Along the way, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I love answering questions. I thrive on answering questions, so ask away. Even if it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the slide at hand, happy to help out. So today we will be talking about gardening for the birds. And I just wanted to start off with a little bit of a story. So when I was fresh out of college, I spent a few summers as a gardener. And so I traveled around to all these properties in my home state of Vermont, helping people, mostly city folk, figure out what kind of plants they were planting, you know, weeding the beds, things like that. And one day we got a new client. He was originally from Connecticut. He just purchased a house up in Vermont, and we were kind of doing the initial tour with him so that he could figure out, you know, where he wanted everything. And as we were walking along, we came to this beautiful showy yellow flower, kind of puffy and really pretty. And he's like, "What's that?" Like, "It's goldenrod. Do you want us to remove it?" Because, you know, most people are like, "Oh, let's pull the goldenrod." And he's like, "Why would I want to do that?" And he's like, so I said, "You know, a lot of people think they're kind of weedy. A lot of folks, it's not really their favorite." And he's like, "No, this is so pretty. I've never seen anything like this in my whole life. Who cares what the neighbors think? I want to keep this goldenrod." And at that point I was like, "You and I, we're going to be friends." So I just, every single time I see a goldenrod plant, I think back to that day, and I think back to how inspiring it was that this, you know, this person from the city was like, "You know what, not only is this plant, you know, here in my yard, but it's really pretty, it's growing on its own, let's let it do what it's doing." So we kind of ended up building his landscape around those goldenrod plants for the fall season. So some of the topics we're going to be discussing today are going to be, why do we garden for wildlife, the basic needs that everything needs to survive, being seasonally savvy, so kind of going throughout the year to see what we can do each season to help the birds and the pollinators. I'm going to give a spotlight. I picked out like 25 plants that we're just going to cycle through really quickly that are 25 of my favorites. Also, I know that at some point or another White River has carried them, so just a little plug for them as well. Some tips for pest control, everything from squirrels to ants. If you're having problems with them in your yard and your feeders, we're going to try and cover that as well. And then some additional resources for native plants as well. So I want to hear from y'all. Why do we garden for birds and for pollinators? What are some reasons? We like our planet, absolutely. What are some other reasons?
Food.
We like to eat food, yeah, exactly. What are some others? Yeah, we like seeing them, right? And what was that about butterflies? Yeah, they make us happy. And Anybody else have any other fun reasons?
Survival of the planet.
Survival of the planet. Yeah, it all kind of goes back to, not only does it make us happy, but it's helping protect the planet as a whole. We're all kind of doing our part. And so also, you know, if you're gardening for your birds and your pollinators, you're kind of providing native pest control as well. And also just watching the birds and the butterflies as well. It's really, really good for our physical, mental, and emotional health. Think about it, when you step outside and you see your garden and you see the birds at your bird feeders, kind of gives you a chance to just take a deep breath and feel a little bit better about the day. So taking care of the birds especially lowers your heart rate, your blood pressure. It gives you kind of a moment to be grounded. And there's actually a new word that's come out recently called ornithotherapy, which is the idea of healing through birds. So it's just a really great way to make yourself feel better too. And so some of the basic needs that everything needs to survive. Every single animal on the planet needs food to survive. And of course, the wider variety of different foods we offer, the wider variety of insects and birds we get as well. You know, kind of offering the full buffet. Everything from seeds and nuts and fruit to native insects are great food for the birds. Offering a wide variety of leaves and stems for those plants to grow on. And then also, you know, thinking about what each individual one has as like their favorite food. Like, how many of you love bluebirds? Pretty great, right? And one of the best ways to bring bluebirds into your yard is to offer them mealworms and other insects. So kind of giving it on a case by case based on what you really want to draw in, kind of knowing what their favorite menu is as well. Next up, we have water. Water is just amazing. Even if you just have a tiny dish of water, that's going to help draw in a lot larger of a number of different species of animals. And if it's fresh and moving and clean, then that's even better. So if you have space for a water feature, even if it's just something small, if you've got something big, that's going to do even more. But every little drop counts. And I also wanted to mention that a lot of insects, like your butterflies, really like having kind of a muddy spot for puddling. How many of you have ever seen that behavior before? Yeah, so the butterflies, you know, they kind of gather around the puddle and they're soaking up the minerals, kind of those trace minerals and the water from that mud as well. So you're providing them something even beyond just the water itself by offering a spot for them. I also just really liked that picture of a robin taking a bath. She seems pretty happy with herself in there. I don't know how many of you can see it, but next off, we have shelter. This is shelter from the elements. Days like today, these trees are great shelter for us. If we weren't here, I'm sure there'd be a large number of different insects kind of buzzing around, especially since I know that this is a spot where we usually end up storing plants for people that are taking them home. But it's not just protection from the elements themselves, it's also a shelter for where they raise their young. That could look like anything from a tuft of grass where a sparrow might lay its eggs, all the way up through trees over our heads that are hosting, you know, possibly thousands of little caterpillars right now. So providing a wide range of different shelters is obviously as well going to bring in a wider variety of different species. And of course, you can always provide supplemental housing like a native bee box or a bird house. And it also allows those water sources to stay cooler as well. How many of you like drinking water that's been sitting out in the sun all afternoon? Nobody? Me neither. And then another spot is space. So habitat loss is the #1 danger to birds in North America, and the same thing is true for a lot of insect species as well. Every square inch of space that we can provide for them, the higher quality the better, the more birds and the more insects you're going to get. That allows them to better control for disease. You know, think about it. If you have this much space, that's going to provide very little space for that social distancing, right? The more space, the easier it is to stay healthy. It also allows them to adapt to changes in the environment. You know, everything from a new building coming up to changes in weather patterns over the years. So it gives them that flexibility to move as needed. And then finally, if we want to have birds, they got to have baby birds. If we want to have bugs, they got to have baby bugs. So having a nice safe place for them to raise their young as well. That means they need to be free from pesticides. That's obvious for the insects, but then also if you think about what baby birds tend to eat, if we're poisoning the bugs, we're poisoning the birds too. Removing any sort of unnatural litter. Pick up your garbage, guys. Offering multiple different locations so they can pick out their favorite spot. Because just like us, like cookie cutter houses do not work for every single person. They don't work for every single living thing either. And then of course, again, different species have different needs. Does anybody have any questions about kind of the focus on the different things that we all need to survive? Awesome. So the next topic is kind of going throughout all 4 seasons and talking about what we can do each time in order to help really boost what we're finding in our yard. And we're going to start with spring. I know it feels like summer today, but we are still technically in spring for another 3 weeks or so. I like to think of springtime as breeding and migration season for the birds. So between the 1st of March and the 15th of June, 100 million birds will fly over Washington County. Sometimes as many as 12 million in a single night. We saw that this year. That was pretty wild. And they use weather radar to kind of estimate and track that, which I thought was really cool. But that means because, you know, things are changing every single day and we're getting a whole new group of birds every single day, we have the widest variety of different bird species this time of year. Plus, all those insects are starting to wake up from their dormancy at the beginning of springtime. You know, think about it, when you see that first bee of the year, that first butterfly of the year, it's really exciting, and it's great to see them all starting to come up and to hang out in our yards and in our gardens. And as a lot of you have seen, birds are already, you know, they've been choosing their nesting locations. Right now they might be choosing a different location for round 2 or even round 3. So they are busy, busy, busy. And I always like to mention, I know we're a little past Orioles season, but springtime is the absolute best time to see the Baltimore Orioles as they pass through. And, you know, they always love, if you have all sorts of colorful flowers, and if you have fruit in your yard too. I know it's a little early for most things, but sometimes even like if you have some early mulberries, that can really draw in a lot of really fun birds with that. And there's just a picture of a hummingbird feeding her babies. We do definitely have hummingbirds nesting here in Northwest Arkansas now as well, which is always great to see the little ones the first time they visit your feeder once they've left. So in the springtime, you know, we're all itching to get our hands dirty in our garden, right? One of the best things you can do for native wildlife is to continue to let anything that you've left over the winter rest, because the insects will continue to emerge from that. The birds will continue to use all those little extra pieces of grass and straw, little seeds that might have been left over the winter. They'll use those for nesting. So you're providing both a chance for the insects to get out and about, as well as awesome nesting supplies for your birds. And then, yeah, especially before all of your flowers start blooming for the year, any of those food sources are super important. Make sure you're planting some early blooming flowering plants, such as trees like redbud and dogwood. Not only do we love them and they look pretty, but they're also a really, really great food source for early pollinators, and also a great spot for birds to find all those insects to feed their babies. Make sure you have all of your nesting locations set up. If you've got nice trees in your yard, save the pruning for once the young have left the nest, maybe, or also make sure that you're putting up your nest boxes. Make sure they're nice and clean. Make sure you've cleaned out all the wasps' nests that are in there from last year after the birds left, you know, kind of getting that spring cleaning set up for the nesting for them. Make sure that water is fresh and moving. The birds are already starting to look for a lot of water, Butterflies are looking for a place to puddle, so you're helping them out as well with that. And then if you want to give them a little bit extra, I like to recommend supplemental feeding with insects like mealworms. You can grind up eggshells and put them out there for the birds. The birds need all the calcium they can get because there's a lot of calcium in eggshells, so you're helping mama out with that. Giving them extra protein. They need to keep going for hours and hours on end. A chickadee family can feed their young 6,000 insects over the course of a season. And it takes mom and dad a lot of energy to keep up with that too. So protein's a great long-lasting fuel for them. And then also make sure that you have fruit and nectar out for your hummingbirds, orioles. I've got jelly out for my catbird right now because I really love seeing my little gray catbird. He'll come, he'll eat some jelly and go, nah, nah. One of my favorite spring sounds. So if I didn't have the jelly out, he would probably be down the road hanging out, by the pond or something. And then, surprisingly, fat is also really helpful this time of year as well. Again, to kind of keep that long-going energy. And then also, as the young birds are leaving the nest and they're growing their first round of feathers, a high-fat diet helps provide for those colorful feathers for the birds too. The more fat a bird gets, the more colorful it can make its feathers. So you're helping the little ones out for their first round of adult feathers as well. Yes. That is a great question. I am not sure about the suet, if it's genetically modified or not. We have at least one suet in the shop, our Simply Suet, that is entirely just the suet. So there's no plants in that. So I don't believe that one would be genetically modified. That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I'm gonna have to go. Let me get back to you on that one. Yeah, and I will say, not all suet is created equally. If you're getting suet, you want to make sure that there's no added millet or anything in that. If you're buying suet, you want to buy the fat, you want to buy the protein. If you're throwing extra millet and stuff into your suet, then you're just paying for seed at the price of suet. Yeah.
Can you describe what suet is?
Yes. So suet is rendered beef fat. I think you can also do it from lambs and sheep, but if you're buying it in bulk in any major store, it's going to be primarily beef. And then there are other things added into it for nutritional value, appeal to the birds, and then this time of year we're switching over to varieties that will not melt in the sun. So there's going to be some other things like at our store we use peanuts and corn as a stabilizer in the summertime. We get rid of a lot of that extra in the wintertime, especially the corn. Because the peanuts are going to be more nutritionally dense, we try and keep those in a lot of our suets year round. Does anybody have any other questions about suet and fat? Yes. Or about anything.
How you mentioned putting the jelly out and the eggshells out. Do you put that in your regular feeders, or is there another way to serve those things to birds?
Great question. So yes, I will. So the question was, when you're putting out eggshells and jelly, do you put them out in a regular feeder? How do you put those out? And what I do in my yard is I take a little cup-shaped feeder, a little snack feeder, maybe even a little bit smaller than this without a lid. And I'll put the eggshells in there, and then jelly I like to put in an even smaller quantity, no more than half an inch or so. That way it's safer for the birds so they don't end up with jelly all over their feathers. I always like to refresh my jelly every day anyways, so I usually say less is more. You don't want to leave it out, especially overnight, because that's how you get raccoons and ants and bees. So, and then the jelly just stays fresher, that way you don't have to worry about it molding if you're changing it out every single day. And with the eggshells, one final thing, I like to put some sort of weather guard over it to make sure I don't end up with eggshell soup the first time it rains, because what is it like to do in the spring? Rain. All the time. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, sure did. Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions about this so far? Then we will jump into summer. And for summer, this is fledgling season for the birds. This is also the season when we tend to have the highest insect diversity. So you've got, everybody's just working overtime every single day because we have so many hours of daylight, and because the temperatures are so warm, it makes it really, really easy to raise your young and to have a successful round of breeding for many insects, you know, plenty of, like, several generations over the course of one summer sometimes. So there's lots and lots going on all at once. How many of you have already started seeing little fledgling birds at your bird feeders? Yeah, so, you know, mom and dad are bringing the babies to the feeders. I just saw my first fledgling bluebird of the year last weekend. They're really cute. They're almost the same size as the grown-ups, but they're kind of speckly. So I always get excited to see them. Wouldn't you know it, all these birds, you need a lot more food to feed all those birds and all those insects. And then by the time, you know, the beginning of summer rolls around, most of the birds that we're going to see are going to be here all summer. They're done migrating. Some exceptions to that are like the purple martins that we have nesting here. A lot of times, as soon as they're done nesting, they'll start migrating south in the middle of the summer. So they're just up here to raise their kids, and then back down south they go. And the reason why they migrate this far north is because the days are longer up here. It gives them more hours in the day to feed their kids. So, you know, think about it. If you are here in Arkansas, you know, it starts getting light at like 4:35 in the morning, and the sun doesn't go down and set, doesn't really get too dark until 9 p.m. If they're at the equator, that's just 12 hours. So lots more opportunities to get all those little insects. And then just remember, during the summertime, I'm going to sound like a broken record, keep planting those flowers, especially flowers with yellow or red blooms tend to be really popular. And then if you kind of space it out so that you always have at least a couple things blooming throughout the whole summertime, that's going to net you the widest variety of different pollinators and birds as well. Make sure your water sources are still full, they're flowing. Summertime tends to be the time when it gets the most stagnant. Clean your bird baths out regularly, watch for mosquitoes. You know, honestly, it's kind of one of the biggest chores in the summertime is to keep that water going, but it's so important. And then in the summertime, continue to feed lots of insects, lots of fats, lots of things that will help those babies grow up big and strong. Any questions about summer?
I have a question about the bird bath.
Yes.
So you use something natural like vinegar, like soda,
Yeah, so what I like to do is I like to get like a nice stiff bristled brush, and it depends on what your bird bath is made out of too. Like if you have like a plastic or a metal bird bath, what I'll do is I'll give it a really good scrub out with the hose, try and get as much of the algae off as possible, and then you can do a 10% bleach solution, dunk it in there, then rinse it off again, make sure it's nice and clean, get all that bleach off, and then put it out. Vinegar is also a really awesome choice, especially if you have something more porous like a concrete or a stone bird bath. And honestly, one of the things that I do that I love to help keep my bird bath from growing the algae back as fast is you can get a copper disc that you put in your bird bath. Copper is naturally antimicrobial, and so, you know, that way you're not adding a bunch of like different additives and stuff. We do have a bird and insect safe enzyme-based cleaner for your bird bath as well that you can also use in the shop. But a lot of it kind of depends on your specific setup and your specific bird bath. Yeah, so the copper disc, I think it's like 99% copper. When the copper sits in the water, you're going to have me go to the chemical process of it. Okay, but the copper itself, when it reacts with the water, it helps kind of kill off the algae, bacteria, fungus, mold. It's really similar to, we have this product for your hummingbird feeder, and this is just a little bit of copper sulfate, the same form of copper that the insects get from the same form of copper that the hummingbirds get from the insect portion of their diet. And you just add a capsule of this in for every cup of nectar, and it keeps your nectar safe and fresh for up to 2 weeks rather than having to change it out every 3 days at 70 degrees, every 2 days at 80 degrees, and every single day once it hits 90 degrees. So this keeps it safer and fresher a lot longer. It helps you feed your hummingbirds more responsibly. This is the only thing other than white table sugar I will ever recommend in hummingbird nectar.
Do you carry them?
Yes, we do. And I know we're getting another big order of them in pretty soon because it's getting to be that time of year. In a pinch, especially if you have a smaller bird bath, if you have some really old copper pennies, you can put those in too. I would just give them a good clean off first, just to make sure there's nothing weird on the pennies themselves. Any other summer questions? Awesome. Then the next season is fall, and I like to think of this as the season of plenty. It's kind of a cornucopia for everybody. Think about it. You have nuts and fruits and seeds and flowers, insects, basically everything that everybody's been working up to all year is finally coming to its culmination in the autumn. So this tends to be the slowest season for bird feeding because there's so much wild food. I always tell people in like October and the beginning of November, if your birds are not visiting your feeders, you are not doing anything wrong. It just happens to be, you know, if you have a choice between a prepackaged lunch, even if it's like gourmet organic food, or you can go out to your garden and pick fresh strawberries and fresh lettuce and make yourself just a delicious fresh salad with some fresh nuts from your pecan tree on top. Which one are you going to pick? Assuming you don't have to do all the work. You know, they're always going out after that fresh stuff. But again, if you want to continue to keep those birds in your yard, make sure you've still got plants flowering, make sure you've still got water going on, and plant plants that are going to supply lots of fruits and nuts in the fall as well for them. And the same thing is true for insects, and I always like to watch the monarchs and the hummingbirds migrate south in the fall. Here in Northwest Arkansas, Labor Day weekend is peak hummingbird migration season. That's when you're going to see more hummingbirds than at any other point in the year. So I usually leave my hummingbird feeder about 2 weeks after I see my last hummingbird. That way any stragglers that are passing through after kind of the peak still have some food on their way south. And I did want to quickly address one misconception about hummingbirds. I've heard several times that people think that because we're feeding the hummingbirds, it's keeping them from moving south. They're like, there's so much food, it's totally fine if I stay here. That's not the case. A lot of our birds, especially like the hummingbirds, move south based on the length of the days, not on food availability. So unless you are artificially like shining lights on them throughout the night, like spotlights on the birds themselves, and especially like it would have to be like daylight mimicking too, the birds are still going to move south. And then this time of year, you know, we all kind of want to like get our gardens cleaned up for the winter and everything. Leave everything there. You're going to have a lot of insects that are going to be overwintering in the stems and leaves and flower heads of those plants, especially a lot of pollinators. You know, you think about the pollinator houses that we get, and they're these long, thin tubes, right? They're taking the place of those plant stems. So the plant stems are kind of offering that same space. I love leaving the leaves as a natural mulch. It helps protect those insects that are overwintering in the ground and in those leaves. You know, it keeps them there for starters. They don't get swept away. But then also cold temperatures, snow, rain, all of those things are going to make it a lot harder for anything deeper in the soil to get through the winter. You're helping provide kind of a buffer to the elements as well. You're providing that shelter.
Yeah, don't bury your leaves anymore.
Love it. And then, yeah, just continue to offer water and stuff. You know, fall tends to be a kind of drier season until November, as we all kind of probably saw last year as well. And then keep offering your bird food even if the birds aren't coming right away. Just keep a look on it, make sure it's fresh, because the birds are looking for where they are going to be able to find winter food. So they're like, is there food here? No? Okay, I'm going somewhere else, bye. So, and some birds will continue to use your feeders. They'll do a behavior called caching. How many of you have ever heard of that before? So they'll take seeds and nuts, and they'll find a tree, for example, and they'll find like a little spot where that bark lifts up the tree, and they'll shove a seed in there, and they're storing it for the winter time. Blue jays will travel as far as 4 miles with an acorn or a seed or a nut. So by offering that food, you're going to keep all those birds a little bit closer. They're going to be doing that caching behavior, and that means that maybe in the winter as well, you'll see more birds kind of going along the trees on your property, looking for those food sources as well. So you kind of help your trees become a bird feeder over the course of the winter too. Questions about fall? All right, well then, let's carry on throughout the cold of the winter. I think of this as the season of need. At this point, most of our insects are going to be dormant for the winter. They might come out a little bit on warmer days, especially a lot of those like flying insects. I've seen butterflies as early as like February before, so it's definitely possible. And the birds need so many calories every single day. A bird can starve to death in a single night if it doesn't get enough food the day before, especially if it's really, really cold. So offering them spots where they can roost in the wintertime as well, anywhere that's got kind of a cover for them. Sometimes you'll see like 5 or 6 birds go into the same nest box, and they're all huddled together for warmth. Especially like bluebirds tend to do that. So by offering roosting locations, that can really help as well. If you have a birdhouse that you're able to like cover the bottom of, you can actually even turn your birdhouse upside down, cover the top to keep rain and snow from getting in, and then the birds, they'll go in through the bottom and all that heat will get trapped at the top of the house. Keep your birds nice and toasty warm over the course of the winter. If you have a water source in your yard, if you have a way to get that water opened up on the coldest days, whether it's like a bird bath heater or some sort of movement, or even just going out there in the morning and like cracking the ice, that's going to really help the birds too. Not only do they need to drink in the winter, but they still need to bathe. Birds with clean feathers are able to stay warmer. So even though it seems counterintuitive that they would want to have the opportunity to take a bath in the cold, it actually helps them in the long run stay warm. And then you'll notice, in addition to visiting your bird feeders, if you have any plants with fruits, fruits, seeds, or nuts, the birds will continue to visit that. Like, especially, how many of you have like a holly tree or a cedar tree that has fruits in the wintertime? If you see that, you've probably seen the cedar waxwings and the robins descend down upon it in large numbers. And that's really fun to see. They can like demolish a tree in like a day sometimes if there's enough of them. So it's kind of like an exciting little thing to see throughout the course of the winter as well. And so just continue to let that natural mulch rest in your yard. Again, remember, it's doing its job to help get you set up for a successful next year. If you can find plants that keep their seeds, fruit, and nuts all winter, that's a really great option to help them out as well. Provide those roosting locations, and then make sure you're focusing a lot on high-fat foods. Really popular options are suet, peanuts. A lot of insect-eating birds will also switch over to fruit in the winter. So if you offer fruit in the winter, you're helping the birds out with that as well. And that kind of brings us through seasonally savvy. What questions does anybody have about kind of going throughout the year? Yes?
How late should, because you have to clean out your garden eventually.
Mm-hmm.
How late should you
So when I had space for like a big garden, I liked to wait until like the first round of fresh growth was really starting to come up. And a lot of it depends too on the plants that you have. You know, some of them do a lot better if you wait until like late spring, early summer. Some of them, you can do some in the fall and that'll help, and then you can still preserve the rest of it till the spring as well. So I would say it depends on the plant. Other questions about gardening through the seasons? All right. And I just kind of went through 25 of my best, or of my favorite plants. I don't have any like major information on them. I just have names and pictures. A lot of these pictures came from White River's webpage too. If they didn't, I credited the pictures below. But I'm just going to go through them really quickly. So we've got some vines, we've got some some just kind of herbaceous plants, we've got some shrubs, trees. But we started off with the trumpet creeper with its beautiful flowers, great for pollinators. American bittersweet, the berries are really awesome sources of food for the birds. So the bittersweet, it does flower, but then it produces these red berries. And you have to look out as well to make sure that it's the American bittersweet versus the Oriental bittersweet, which is invasive. So that's why I had to specify the American bittersweet on this one. Virginia creeper grows like a weed around here, provides great fruit for the birds. Maples, buckeyes, great for the hummingbirds and the butterflies in the springtime. That's one of my personal favorites. Service berries are really great. Dogwoods, persimmon, walnuts, mulberries. And I can give y'all, like, if y'all want to come up after the talk and see the whole list. I know I'm kind of going through it like that, rapid fire.
Lauren,
Yes.
we are recording this for YouTube, our YouTube channel, and
Perfect.
we'll get your slideshow and put it on there too.
Yeah, that sounds great. Awesome. Yeah. So it'll be on YouTube as well. And the slideshow will all be on there. The mulberry, pine trees, oaks, yarrow is a really good one. Any of our native milkweeds, coneflowers, cardinal flower, bee balm, tick seed, black-eyed Susan, goldenrod. Y'all remember that from the beginning. And I had to mention the bluestem. It's one of my favorite native grasses. Great food for the birds and great spots for the insects. And whoops, I hit the wrong button there. Y'all wanted to see goldenrod again, right? Beautyberry, buttonbush, holly and kind of the related species in the genus Ilex, spicebush, and that brings us to pest control. So, I kind of tried to focus on like a variety of different plants that flowered and fruited at different times of the year. A single native tree can support like hundreds of different species of insects. So, versus, non-natives, which might support like 5, and a lot of them are pretty pesky themselves. A wide variety of different native plants will provide a wide variety of native insects, as I think I've said like 5 or 6 times now. I apologize for repeating myself again. Now we get into pest control. What are some of the biggest pests that you might have in your yard around your bird feeders? And his bigger, fluffier, we'll call him cousin, the raccoon. Yeah. Trash pandas, yeah. So we'll look at them a little bit. So for those of you in the back that maybe can't see this slide, we have a large birdhouse and there's a little raccoon face peeking out of it. He's kind of cute, but you don't want him, in your yard and at your feeders. So one of my favorite things to recommend if you have any sort of furry friend that maybe isn't a friend, hot pepper will make them sweat. Like Blaze, our hot pepper squirrel right here. Little ironic, don't you think? So you can get seed and suet that's been infused with hot pepper, or you can infuse it at home. It has to be at least habanero hot. Otherwise, a lot of the squirrels will still figure out their way around it and still eat it anyways. Sometimes like 2 to 5% of squirrels can even handle that, which is amazing. But like 95% of the time, hot pepper is going to take care of your furry problems. Also, if you are storing your food, store them indoors in metal containers or outdoors in metal containers. Metal containers are just amazing to keep them out. If you have raccoon issues, you might even need to lock those containers. They're pretty smart. I actually had to lock one of my metal bins with a climbing carabiner that was like a 3-stage carabiner in order to keep raccoons out. So locking up your food is really helpful. If you have a pull system or a post that you're putting your bird feeders and bird houses on, you can get a baffle. I like the big stovepipe ones because depending on if you put them on there at a good height, about 5 feet, you can keep squirrels and raccoons away with that. And then if you're having issues with things like moles or mice, use tray type feeders to keep your food off the ground. That way you're not inviting them to come for that all-they-can-eat buffet too. Next off, we have insects. We love insects. That's part of the reason why y'all are here today, right? But sometimes there's too many of them in a place you don't want them, especially like ants and bees. And so The first point on the slide seems kind of counterintuitive, reduce pesticide use to get rid of bugs. But if you think about it, the pesticides, a lot of times they're killing the beneficial insects. You know, things like your praying mantises, your ladybugs, things like that. Your native wasps that are helping control those caterpillar populations, guess what? The caterpillars come back way faster than the wasps do a lot of the time. So by allowing them to do their job as beneficial insects, you're also helping reduce the pesky ones. Make sure you're offering things that those insects in particular really like the wasps and the native praying mantises. And that's going to really help draw them in as well. If you build it, they will come, right? Provide nesting locations for all of those birds that like to eat bugs, in particular like bluebirds, swallows, purple martins, bats. I know bats aren't birds, but I kind of included them on there because they eat a ton of insects too. If you provide housing for them, they'll take care of a lot of your problem as well. And then if you are doing like a hummingbird feeder, we have hummingbird feeders that have an ant moat built in. So if you have issues with ants, you fill this inner chamber with water, and the ants can't cross the water barrier, so they can't get to your nectar. You can also put bee guards on your hummingbird feeder, and they even have an ant-proof gel that you can get now that is absolutely amazing. The base for it, it's the same oil that the birds put on their feathers, so it's totally bird safe. And the secret ingredient that keeps the insects away is cinnamon. So the ants can't cross that barrier, so they leave. And that's one of my favorite things. And then in order to prevent other pests, store your food in a cool, dry location. And I generally recommend, especially in the summer and the fall time, only store like 2 weeks worth of bird food at a time. That way you don't have a chance for a full infestation to occur should something get in there. How many of you have ever had issues with snakes getting into your nest box? I was going to say, wow, is this going to be the first time nobody has? But yeah, they can get in there sometimes. There are baffles that you can use to kind of keep them away. We have a spiky like snake guard that you can put around the entrance to your birdhouse. The snakes don't like that texture, so that can keep them away. And one of the biggest things you can do is if you have a brush pile in your yard, super awesome thing for the birds, super awesome thing for the insects. If you keep it away from your nesting location, that gives the snakes fewer places to hide close to your nest box. So you can kind of even plan out where your brush piles are to help protect your birds. And then I did want to add one thing. Remember, snakes are also pest control. They will eat all those mice and rats and squirrels and stuff, so they have their place and they can be really helpful. One thing I did want to say, I've heard this come up a couple times, it's the topic of mothballs. Mothballs, one, do not deter snakes, and two, are actually harmful for the birds, and three, are actually illegal to use in nest boxes because it's not part of their intended purpose. So leave the mothballs for your closet and you'll have happier birds and no fewer snakes than you would otherwise. Does anybody have any questions kind of about these pest deterrents? Or, yes?
So you said plant other plants in the garden to attract beneficial insects. So what are examples of those?
Yeah, so especially plants with like kind of those wider spot or stalks for like the different parasitic wasps and stuff. Yeah, hop on in and help me out with this one. I'm calling on a friend.
So there are, our pollinators are attracted to the flowers, and a lot of those even will, a lot of the flowers that attract butterflies also attract wasps, which you mentioned have they don't get the caterpillars that are going to cause the problems eating other things that you don't want them to eat. But one specific plant that we actually have in right now is Helenium. It is a horrible common name, sneezeweed. It does not make you sneeze. It was used in traditional Indian ceremonies, and I think that is where I've read is actually the Native American process. It does make you sneeze if you inhale it. So, in a powder. Too much information. But the flower itself has the parasitic wasp, very specific parasitic wasp that it attracts. that will do things like the caterpillars of Japanese beetles. Okay, so there's specific wasps for all the insects. Some are broader, but there are some specific things like that. It's not a native plant specifically, but rue, which we grow for our butterfly caterpillars. Those flowers, as well as yarrow, which you mentioned,
Love yarrow.
all bring in some of those parasitic wasps, including the red wasp, kind of that general group. I am not an entomologist, so I don't know all their names, but rue is visited often by wasps, red wasp, the house wasp. There's several of those that also prey on caterpillars of other pests. So those are just a couple right off the top of my head. She was mentioning the stems. So a lot of Joe Pye weed has a hollow stem, or it's used. It may not be truly hollow, but they can go in and eat out the inner side. I don't know what it's called. Bone marrow of the stem, okay? And they can house in that over winter. And another thing that we often don't, we want all the flowers, but like the grasses are so vital for the birds specifically. They can use it for nesting and hiding in, but our insects are overwintering in some of these native grasses. So if we would incorporate more of these grasses into our flower gardens, you actually see more birds and more pollinators show up because they have a place to continue to live. So those are also going to attract a longer term resident in the grasses. So incorporating a few of those can actually improve. I've had people come and tell me they planted all these flowers. We had some visitors that they planted a few grasses in and it tripled their visitation and what they were seeing happen in their garden. So all of those can help.
Thanks so much for jumping in. She knows the plants a lot better than I do. I know the birds, and I'm so glad to have a little extra help on answering that. Thank you so much. Other pest deterral questions? Awesome. All right. And so, of course, I had to mention White River Nursery in our native plant resources. I also mentioned Bluestem Hollow as another really great resource. I really like White River, though, because they have a huge variety. You can find them anytime right here. So it makes it super duper easy to get your native plants here. I've really enjoyed partnering with White River this spring at the shop. We had some really, really amazing plants, and I can't speak enough about the quality of the plants that they bring out and that they share with the public. So thank you, White River, for that. And then, of course, locally sourced native plants are the best. You can find lots of wildflower mixes on the internet, but native plants that are grown right here in this area are going to be much more capable of surviving the temperatures and weather conditions, soil types, etc., unique to this part of the country. A coneflower raised in Minnesota is going to be very different from a coneflower raised in Arkansas, as I'm sure you can imagine. Whoops. And hey, yeah, just take advantage of native plant sales. And then if you want more information about native plants and which ones are really good, the Audubon Society has an amazing native plant resource database that you can go through. So I have a link to that here in the slide as well. Any other questions about native plant resources? Awesome, I think. And so we're getting down to our questions and comments. Any final questions, comments, stories? Yeah.
Hey Lauren, what do you use to identify birds in your own backyard?
Great question. What do I use to identify birds in my backyard? There is an amazing free app called Merlin Bird ID. Absolutely amazing. It'll identify pictures of birds. It'll identify descriptions of birds. It will identify the birds' sounds as they are singing in real time to let you know who's talking to you. If you have not downloaded Merlin, that is my #1 favorite birding resource. I love it because you can use it here in Arkansas, or if you're traveling, elsewhere in the country, and there's even there's over 1,000 different species of birds that are supported now too. So even some international travel, you download the pack for that area. Merlin will tell you who's there. You don't need, a stack of field guides. You just need your phone. It'll help you identify just about anything you can find. I will say it's not 100% accurate. I thought my phone vibrating was an owl once, but it will get you on the right track. And I'd say probably 95% of the time it's spot on. So.
You can also connect it to your eBird account.
Yes.
And you can upload that data to the science mission.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about it too, is when you find a bird and you're like, yes, this is my bird, and you tell Merlin that it's right, that information gets passed on to eBird, which is also run through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which is the #1 bird resource in the United States and one of the top ones in the world for sure. So you're not just helping yourself learn what's in your yard, but you're helping scientists all over the world, from now until forever, understand bird populations and migration patterns, and you're helping be a part of a bigger picture for bird conservation, and in turn also the conservation of plants and insects and mammals and amphibians and reptiles and all these things that make up this giant planet that we call home. Can you tell I'm a little passionate about Merlin? Other questions? Yes.
One comment about sources for native plants. The local master naturalist grows native plants every year, and they sell them, well, for one place, in plant gardens,
Mm-hmm.
plant sales, and other places as well. And that's pretty dependable because they are season collected in this area and grown.
Yeah, the master naturalists also have an absolutely amazing native plant. They'll usually do a couple sales every year, and yeah, they are those native ecotypes, which that just means they were grown in this area. They've lived in this area for generations upon generations. So those ecotypes, the master naturalist do a really great job of making sure that they have a lot of local native plants too. So thanks for bringing that up. I love the master naturalists. Questions, comments? Everybody still doing okay? Nobody sweating too much? Yeah. Thank y'all so much. And if y'all are interested, I did bring a selection of items from the shop that I'll have for sale up here at the front. Otherwise, y'all have that hobby guide. If you come into the shop, there's a 20% off coupon on the back of that for one item in the shop. Plus, if it's your first time, we'll send you home with some free seed from the shop as well, our best-selling No Mess bird seed. So stop on by, say hi to us. Thank y'all so much again for coming out.